There's a strong desire for companionship and to be seen and witnessed, but there isn't an opportunity or a space that makes it acceptable to do so outside of sports. And even then, there's this like filter. We've had some amazing conversations where men have, or, boys have said, my coach is one of the people, my football coach is one of the people that's called me, the B word or the P word. And then it made me angry. And so then I called this boy because he missed his hit. So the next play I said, don't be a pussy, make your hit. And literally like in real time watching them say, if I don't have the capacity and the space to express how that made me feel, how a man or someone else speaking to me in that way made me feel, I'm going to pass it on to someone else as a way to motivate them. And another thing that I'll say is that young men are incredibly confused right now overall about what it means to be a man. So the words of influencers like Andrew Tate and Jordan Peterson, and again, bodybuilding social media content creators who have a very binary like alpha male versus beta male rhetoric, those messages are super appealing because it's a rubric, it's a blueprint, and there isn't an adequate blueprint or rubric from like progressive society at large. There aren't sufficient, here is how to be a good man. Here's how to demonstrate healthy masculinity. It's so much harder to do that and provide that guideline than it is just to say, well, don't be weak, don't be soft, don't cry. Like that's a pretty concrete list. Like at least it's the evil I know.
My name is Ryan, and welcome to the Taking Off the Mask podcast, where men get real. You might be wondering, who's Ryan and what did he do with Ashanti? What's going on here? Well, I'm the producer of the show, and I'm filling in for Ashanti, who's in a conference in San Francisco, and I'm doing today's intro. Now, for those of you who are new to the show, this show is about taking off our masks, and by mask, we're referring to the front of the mask and the back of the mask. And the front of the mask represents those qualities and characteristics about ourselves that we gladly show the world. And the back of the mask represent those qualities and characteristics that we don't often talk about. So maybe try that out for yourself right now and just think, what are some things about me that I don't often share with my friends? Maybe I want to share those things, but I just don't get to that often. Today, sharing his mask is Johnny Cole. Now, let me just read a little bit about Johnny here for you. Johnny is the 26-year-old founder of Hey Brother Co., a men's work organization committed to reshaping the contemporary narrative of masculinity to promote a safer, more abundant world for all. His personal mission is to foster healthy communities of men and boys unencumbered by patriarchal norms. Johnny brings a unique perspective to the field of men's work. As a survivor of domestic violence and rigidly patriarchal upbringing, Johnny prides himself on his ability to transmute his painful lived experiences and traumas into opportunities for others to heal. So, yeah, as the producer of the show, I listen to every episode, and I have to say this conversation really does have a lot. They hit a lot of topics, and it is rich as rich can be. Now, let me just read some of the things that they cover. For one, Johnny's father was in the South African border war and was a member of a battalion known as the Murder Battalion. And just growing up in a household run by someone who was a member of the Murder Battalion, just imagine what that conversation is like. Some other stuff includes ketamine-assisted mirror work, negative self-talk, teaching in America versus teaching in other countries that actually appreciate their teachers. They also talk about Andrew Tate, Jordan Peterson, and young men and how they take in that information being... I don't even know if I should call it information, but take in all that stuff being put out online by Tate and Peterson. And then ultimately, what I come back to is just how present Johnny was during the entire conversation. He is a fan of Ashanti's work, and he just really intently listens and intently responds. You know, sometimes when you're in a conversation and then you're listening, you're hearing someone, but are you actually listening to them? Johnny actually listens, and whatever he says in response is proof that he is truly listening and thinking about the words you are saying to him. So I really appreciated that, and I really appreciate how much he poured into this conversation. And so, yeah, I think you'll really enjoy this conversation with Johnny Cole. And a couple of housekeeping things. Just want to remind you to save the date, May 25th. The Ever4 Club is turning 20 years old, and it's the 20th annual 5K relay at San Lorenzo High School. So come join us there and enjoy this episode with Johnny Cole.
Johnny Cole, welcome to the Taking Off the Mask podcast. So glad to have you.
Thank you so much, Ashanti. It is an honor to be here.
Well, I'm excited that we get to have this conversation. What I want you to do is you can introduce yourself to folks, let them know what you want them to know about you, and then we'll jump into these masks.
That sounds good to me. Thank you. So my name is Johnny Cole, and I am a men's work practitioner and the founder of a men's work company called Hey Brother Co. I'm also a brother and a son. I also work in the tech industry, but at my core, I'm a man who deeply believes in a world where men and boys are free to express ourselves fully, and I think that is a safer world for all people of all identities. So that's about me, and I conduct men's work and practice that through men's retreats, virtual workshops, men's groups, and facilitate dialogue with young men and boys to engage more with our emotions and express ourselves.
Yeah. And we got connected, you and I. So first of all, thank you for the intro and thank you for the work you're doing in the world. You and I got connected through one of my friends in this work, Mike Sagoon, who was also a guest on our show. And you're doing some work in some schools where you are, which is really beautiful. So I hope we talk about that a little bit as we jump in. But as a guest, you get to decide who goes first. So first we're going to do these masks, and then the conversation goes wherever the conversation is supposed to go. So you decide, do you want me to go first or do you want to go first? And it's up to you. Whatever you choose is great.
Did your mentor on the last episode make you go first?
He went first.
Okay. So then I'm going to Uno reverse card. I would love to hear about your mask. And I got some questions for you as well, based on the Man Enough episode that you did, where I was sobbing in the park listening to you speak to Justin and Jamie and Liz and felt really connected to you. So I'm hoping to check in on some of the things from that episode. I'm curious to hear about your mask.
That was a powerful episode. Thank you for that. All right. What I'll do is I'm going to do the front, and then you can do your front, and then I'll do the back. Okay. So here's my mask. This is the mask I drew. I'm working on a new design of a mask. So that's the mask. It's an M, but it connects to the mask. And the words I chose on the front, the things that I gladly let people see, I wrote excited, purpose, something like purpose driven, purpose, and caring. And I think the one I want to talk about more probably the purpose, because I didn't write purpose driven, but purpose is a deep drive of mine. Like, I think growing up, my vision was to be like growing up poor in Oakland. I wanted to be rich. So my purpose was like, get out of Oakland, go get an education, go get a job, make a lot of money and live happily ever after. That was my plan. And so I think that was the original purpose. And I started on that purpose journey, started making good money, living in a fancy place. And then all of a sudden, something else got in the way. Something else started interfering with the purpose. Like that purpose started getting shifted. And you can almost say it actually changed. I didn't ever not really want to have, good job, make a lot of money, live happily ever after. I wanted it a different way. Mm. And I think that's how it all happened. And so caring, kind of the root of kind of how I grew up, caring for others, being the oldest of four, taking care of my siblings, like a nurturer, came to the forefront. And it wasn't, there was not much room for that in the engineering field. Yeah. So it almost was like either I leave this and go try and do this other thing, or I stay in this and try and find it on the side. And I think it was just trying to mentor on the side was, you could do that some, but I think it was still like an afterthought at the end of, working as a engineer for a big company, so it was, I only had a little bit left to give at the end of the a massive amount of work that as an engineer required me to do. So caring took over, and becoming a teacher was that way at putting caring on more on the front of the journey. So that's the front of my mask. That's the front.
Thank you so much for sharing that with me. Do you mind if I ask you a question?
Sure.
Well, I would love to know how that paradigm shift happened for you, because as young men in the American culture, we have an idea that providing, as under masculinity, is material provision. It is wealth. So you were technically on the most common path that a lot of men and boys feel leads them to be the provider in the way that we think men should provide. And so it's really amazing to me and impressive to hear that as a 20-something, you were able to have that paradigm shift and understand there was a disconnect in the way that you wanted to provide, while not part of our traditional script of masculinity, was still a strong enough pull that you were willing to sacrifice the financial rewards of a lucrative career in engineering. And so, how did that take place? And did you have any shame or reservation about sharing that with people at the time you were making that choice?
Yeah, and that may come up on the back. Actually, now you make me think about it. I think it's going to come up on the back, but I'm going to put a note right here, because that word, when you said shame, is actually a big one around what I felt when I went from going out with my buddies Friday night to the clubs in San Francisco and telling people, oh yeah, I'm an engineer, and seeing how they respond to you. And then 2 weeks later, a month later, you're at some other club and people say, oh, because everyone asks, what do you do? And you say, oh, I'm a teacher. And they're like, oh, right. It's a feeling.
Mm-hmm.
It may not be exactly the words they said that were different, but it's the feeling that I got, or it's even how I felt about it deep myself, how I felt their feeling.
Yeah.
And I think that teachers in this country don't get a lot of respect.
Absolutely.
I got way more respect when I moved to India and did a Fulbright there. Like, teachers are seen as revered people in the society, as opposed to how they're seen here. So it was oh my goodness, I had people would be touching my feet, and I'm like, wait, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? What's happening here?
Yeah.
And then I had, I'm like, that's a sign of respect. I'm like, I'm not used to I'm not used to that, right? So I think just being from a place where you get blamed the fact that of everything that's wrong with school, to a place where people are like, we honor you for the work you do to help our kids have a better life too, is a different thing. So anyway, but there's definitely I think more of the shame was just a feeling of this is getting a different response.
Yeah.
You don't get, it's a different kind of response you get when you tell those two different worlds. So yeah, it was a lot. It was a lot of work. It took a lot of emotional work to and I wasn't doing no men's work back then. I was a partying person. I would definitely had never gone to any men's retreats. I didn't give myself room to have emotions, unless it was anger or funny or the basic ones that men allow to have,
Yeah.
So yeah, I may touch on that again when we get to the back, but yeah, thank you for that question. I think that's a powerful question, and it's the one that I think about all the time, especially now that we're hitting our 20th anniversary of this work. So yeah.
Which, congratulations, by the way. And I know that in the episode with Gael, you actually mentioned, you acknowledged at the very beginning, hey, I want to acknowledge that I have received this presidential medallion for my commitment to this work. And you registered some discomfort that was coming up for you. And then back on the episode of Man Enough with Liz, Jamie, and Justin, you said when they pressed you and Jamie pressed you to what would Ashanti need to hear? And you talked about the financial sacrifice. You have made a sacrifice in your career choice in order to, for the past several decades, work with youth, work with young boys, work with young men, and make a cultural change. And so even 2 decades later, allowing yourself to receive and self-acknowledge. So I've even in the past year witnessed that trajectory through consuming the media that you're on. And it's just really amazing to see, and helps give me a northward light as well.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's a big math problem that I had to do, and I have to resist doing it anymore. Don't do that math. Don't do that math.
Yeah.
Right? When they say that math ain't mathin', that's the math that's not mathin' for anyone who decides that they want to be a teacher. Because to be paid as a teacher means you have to decide that there are certain things I know I'm not going to be able to do.
Right.
There's certain places I'm not going to be able to go. There's certain places that me as an independent being, right? And maybe I have a partner who has another career and they can bring some things to the table. That's something different. But what I can do for myself, it puts a limit. And I think that that's a powerful draw to someone who says, I want to be independent. I want to live on my own and have XYZ. You wouldn't go to this profession to be a person, I think, who felt like you wanted. I mean, I'm trying to say it carefully because I'm speaking from my perspective and I'm not speaking for everyone. Like I wanted nice things and I wanted to live a certain type of lifestyle.
Yeah.
I wanted to go out on the weekends with my friends and hang out and not have to be like, oh, you know what? I'll meet y'all at the club because I'm not going to go to dinner. Y'all going to some fancy restaurant that I can't really afford. And so instead of having to say that or be at dinner eating icicles, then to like be like, I get to like enjoy the social time with my friends who work in these professions. They get paid well. And so to not be there is almost like, I don't want to feel that. So it's better to me just not to put myself in that position, right? Which almost has you pull yourself away for the sake of giving back to my community. But how do you equate the giving of my community to how I feel about what I'm getting in return? How I'm able to go home on the weekends, and so it's powerful. So let's jump into them. Let's finish your math. You coming in with fireball questions today.
No,
Johnny Cole. Like what's happening?
I told you I've been a fan of yours, man. For
oh
years,
my goodness,
for almost 10
oh,
years.
Man.
So I'll show my mask now, though. So I drew a little mask. It's actually me. You can see my beard and my little man bun peeking out from behind the mask. That's got a smile, and there's two holes for my eyes, and one of the eyes has a eyebrow notch, which I have, and a little tear coming down. And the words and qualities that I chose were capable, virtuous, and wounded. And I think I easily let people see, or want people to see, that I am capable of greatness, of ambitious things, that I'm doing good, meaningful work, and that I can do it. It's very important to me. And virtuous, that the work has a positive impact, that I am an inherently good person, and that I seek to cause no harm. I'm well-intentioned. It's very important to me that people think that. But the third one that I want to focus on that's most important is wounded. And I put that on there deliberately because I'm at a very recent time in my life where I've started to tell people that I have complex post-traumatic stress disorder, and have been opening up a lot more about my upbringing and my childhood and my experiences with my father, and how that has created a lasting wound in me, both in, emotionally and in my body and in my nervous system, that I've been battling with for my entire life. And it isn't until the past 3 months or so that I've started to get specific treatment and help for post-traumatic stress disorder. And so that's been a huge liberating thing for me, is actually wearing this on the front of my mask in the past month, telling people, hey, I actually have this diagnosis. I have complex PTSD, and I'm actually seeking a specialized form of therapy for this. So I'm going to say some no's, and I might have to be a little softer and a little slower, and I might not be able to do as much. And I've taken a break from my business, from Hey Brother Co. in many capacities, so that I can manage and focus inward. So that doing this mask made me feel really proud and introspective, and the fact that, my woundedness is something I'm trying to show to more people, that vulnerability.
Thank you. Thank you. I thank you for naming that and for putting it on the front. I think in our work, we've, all these masks. I've seen when someone says a word like that on the front, it's like, I just hold space right there. Like just knowing how sometimes challenging it is, right? Like challenging it is to put it out, because that willingness to be vulnerable has risk involved.
Yeah.
So thank you for being courageous, and I think saying no. Like you said, I have to say no sometimes, right? I got to do less. And we're in a culture that's expected to do more, say, go after all the opportunities. And you're like, yes. And I know the feeling of that. And so for the courage to say, yeah, I got to say no more right now.
Yeah.
And I got to take care of me. I got to take care of me. So thank you for doing that work to take care of you.
Well, you set that precedent for me again on the Man Enough episode. You talked about your boyhood experiences, and you disclosed aspects of your life and your trauma and your upbringing. That's a huge platform, and so that is what I try to hammer home with men's work, and I try to encourage men and boys to do, is what I call precedent of emotional leadership, and that is who you are, which is why you are a hero of mine. And so I feel much more comfortable in this space taking off my mask and showing my full self, because you have done that. You walked so that I could run at 26. And so I don't think I would have this mask ready if not for you.
I'm gonna take a breath, and and I appreciate you. My tendency is to try and just keep moving, and I want to keep moving because I have a hard time accepting appreciation. I love appreciating people, and I think I've not often had my own ability to accept the appreciation when it comes from others, even though I know how good it feels to give it. And not that I think sometimes I have to feel like, who's he talking about? Who's he talking about? Like I almost have to like pinch my and knowing that I have often not felt like enough, and I'm actually that's gonna start on the back. Yeah, I'm gonna start there because I appreciate it. I'm testing my ability to sit in the little bit of the discomfort and the gratitude of it, because they're both like right there. The gratitude and the just not me. Like I didn't set this up. Like I didn't want him to say good things about me. Like right. Like I know better how to deal with somebody saying something negative about me than I do when they said something positive about me. I have more experience in my life of dealing with people saying negative things than positive things. And I think because if I was being honest, I feel this one coming. Oh man. I think when I look in the mirror, I'm more often than not saying mean things about myself to myself. If I could be a little more honest, I probably would be the meanest friend that I have. And I'm working on that. That's the next lesson of my own personal life, of experience, of like, to be kinder, to treat myself like I treat people who I love.
Yeah.
I would never talk to people I love the way I talk to myself. And so my work is deep. It goes back to old recordings from elementary school. It goes back to that. So when I see a young man in my work who is like resisting to take up space, or thinking that they're what they need to say is not important in the moment, when I say to them, no, this is your time right now, and I make everybody else not stop talking, be quiet. This is his time right now. Like I do it for lots of reasons, but I think deep down, I wish somebody had slowed it down enough for me to be seen too.
Yeah.
And so deep down, that's the back. If I was these are just the words that just came right now. So when I think about grief, not enough, and the blank one, I think the one that's there is that part of just like that self-talk, that negative self-talk, that negative self-talk. And these are the ones I'm working on. That's this current chapter. Somebody made a post the other day and it was like, I hate social media. That's what the person was. He was like, nah, I really hate it. He said, I'm just doing my best to like look at this image and love myself a little bit more. And when he said that, I was like, whoa. And I wrote him a message. I was like, thank you for that post. Right. And I think that is it. And I'm working on that. That's the part of myself that I am in this season giving time for. I'm giving myself time for grief that I have suspended, that I ignored, that I denied that I needed. I'm giving myself, I'm like paying more attention to the words I say to myself about myself. And I'm doing more work to believe that I'm enough, regardless of the clicks and the likes and the vanity metrics that I sometimes get sucked into. So that's the back of my mask today.
Wow. That was fiercely, courageously vulnerable, and I noticed some tears well up for you, and I noticed a change in your voice, and I've had little tears in my eyes at various points during this episode as well, and you really moved me with not just your vulnerability, but how resonant I feel with that sentiment. That is something that I have described to other people about myself, is that if I ever caught someone speaking about a friend of mine the way that I speak about myself, I would jump in and intervene and say, how dare you? What are you doing? Don't treat someone like that. But it comes so naturally. And something that I've been learning a lot more recently about people who have experienced complex or ongoing trauma repeatedly during childhood or throughout their life is that it disrupts your core identity, and specifically disrupts your belief in self. So I have struggled for my entire life since as I was little. I thought that there was something wrong with me because of the way that my father treated me and abused me and my mom and my sister. And it has manifested into being a young man that can honestly self-sabotage based on how much shame I carry that doesn't have any reason behind it. There's nothing that I have actually done. There is no memory or person who can say that I wronged them in such a way, but there's just this core feeling. So to share the back of my mask, I wrote that exact same word. I wrote shame about my core identity. I wrote CPTSD, which is what affects my core or disrupts my core identity. And then I wrote incompetence, things that I should learn to delegate, upskill in, or let go of. And an exercise that I did recently in therapy is I actually brought a mirror to my therapy session, and I have done 2 sessions of ketamine-assisted psychotherapy as the psychedelic therapy that I'm using to treat my CPTSD. So I brought a mirror and had the intention to have a conversation with myself, because I know where the source of all of that negativity is coming from. There's no one left in, like, I haven't spoken to or seen my dad in 5 years. There's no presence in my life right now that is giving me negativity except for myself. So I brought a mirror and I sat it down and I had a good 25-minute conversation with myself, just staring myself in the eyes and like, what do I need to hear? And there was some tears and there was this overflowing emotion, and a wellspring that came up of the criticisms are a form of trying to protect myself. But there's nothing so wrong about me that needs to be changed in order to protect me, because there's no threats anymore, So it's not actually helpful. And I would love to check in with you in a couple of weeks if you have a conversation with yourself. And actually, I think we use this phrase and this metaphor a lot, who I see in the mirror. But that's one of the exercises that I encourage in my men's groups and I assign as kind of homework sometimes, is like, hey, man, if you have a really hard time with negative self-talk, I would love for you to set a timer and go and talk in front of the mirror and look yourself in the eyes, and maybe just start with the words, I love you, and see what happens. And I have a lot of men, that myself included, that was one of the first huge breakdowns I ever had, was looking myself in the eyes in a mirror, seeing my face and expressing love and compassion. There's just so much of your story that does resonate with me, and I feel deep gratitude that you are who you are despite what you've been through.
Thank you for that. I did this activity with the mirror, and I'm going to do it again. Actually, it was a powerful one. I was at the Sacred Sons event in Oregon. It was on the coast. So I think it was at an old Boy Scouts or something, Boys Club of America. I don't know one. It was one of them owned the site, but we rented it out. So, but it was where it was in the forest, and then you can take this trail down to the ocean. So it was like where the forest meets the ocean, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's this little area, little cove. When you go, there's one little walk area, and they had set up this little situation. You have to climb in, you sit down, and there's this mirror that was with a bunch of dead wood around it, like driftwood that had been built around this mirror. And man, as I just sat there just looking at myself, it was that moment of like, ooh, like, what do you need to let go of? What do you need to let go? Oh, what do you need to let go of? What do you need to let go of? What do you need to let go of that you're holding on to that are old recording? Like that, it was the question was just, what do you need to say goodbye to?
Yeah.
That was kind of the theme of it. But as I went in, I'm like, oh yeah, I need to say goodbye to this negative self-talk, this image that I like, all the old recordings that are still in there. Do I need to get rid of these recordings? How many how many cassette tapes do I just hold on to because of one day they're going to be worth something? I mean, literally, like, oh, that's a real, like, I have cassette tapes at my house, and I'm like, okay, am I going to buy a cassette player to play these one day? Or am I just nostalgically holding on to these things, right? Like, oh, yeah, I'm just holding on to them. I'm holding on to a lot of stuff, most emotionally and physically. Like I have a room in my home that needs to probably be just emptied.
Yeah.
And every time I go in there, I'm like, oh, I need to keep that for that reason. I need to keep that. Like, I can make up good reasons why everything in there needs to be kept. Like good reasons, like good, like sound reasons. Like, I'll argue with you if you try and tell me that my reason's not good. And I think it's to do the same thing with stuff happening in my heart. Like old things that people said to me, old things that people did. And those recordings are on demand. Sometimes I don't plan them, and sometimes I can pull them. Oh man, I remember that. Oh man, I remember that. And so I think the work that we get to do, that you've chosen to do to help other men, to now be really intentional about helping yourself, to helping the little boy in you who needed to hear the right words at the right time. And we can't go back and change it. We can just take it from where we are today. And I really love the idea of that activity. You gave me an idea what I'm going to do with some of my middle schoolers this week, because my middle school club there, we have a wild time in that group. But that idea of like, what do I say? What do I say when right? What do I say? And how do we begin to start that process earlier?
Absolutely. I think the negative self-talk and some of these things we hold on to, like the emotional clutter, in my experience, feels like I'm holding on to it just in case I fail, and then it confirms that was true. It confirms that whatever that person did to me or said to me, I deserved it, or they knew all along. And so that's what sometimes like comes in my head, is that I deserved that treatment because there is something inherently wrong. And so if I let go of that belief and then I fail, or then something else happens, then there's no backstop. I don't have the belief to hold on to that, like, oh, I knew it all the time. Like, in some way it would validate for me what I've suspected all along, which I'm going to tell myself now, like, is not true. No one deserves abuse. No one deserves lack of dignity or autonomy, both bodily or otherwise. No one deserves that. But it's so crazy. I mean, there's researchers far smarter than I, like, Bessel van der Kolk is one of them, Gabor Mate. Like, there's a lot of folks that are preeminent scholars in the trauma research field that can speak to how these things manifest both in our hearts and minds and in our bodies, and how these beliefs, like, we do need them to feel comfortable and safe. But yeah, our work as healers, educators, folks who are trying to break cycles is also to focus inward and break these cycles of thought within ourselves. And yeah, that's been a big takeaway for me in starting my men's work journey in 2022, was from then to now, is understanding how hypocritical I can be if I have all of these things to recommend to other men, and if I have all of these philosophies and values that I believe would make the world a better place, but I'm so reticent to apply them internally because it's too scary and I don't feel that I'm worthy, or it shouldn't apply to me. And that's that shame dictating our life.
I think when you said the one name of that, you said Vessel.
Yeah, Bessel van der Kolk is I think he's the from the Netherlands. He's the Dutch doctor and psychiatrist and trauma researcher who wrote "The Body Keeps the Score," which I think was in 2019, maybe that came out.
I thought the name sounded familiar, and I just wanted to make sure that yes, "The Body Keeps the Score" is a powerful book. Very, very. I have the book, and I listen to it on audio. Yeah, powerful. There's another book called I forgot the author, but it's It Didn't Start With You. It Didn't Start With You by Mark Wolin. And yeah, Mark Wolin. It didn't start with you. And the tagline says, "How inherited family trauma shapes who we are and how to end the cycle."
Mm.
And it's really, really powerful. Just really starting to put some words from people who have done the research, right? They've done the studies of what is it. Okay. Oh, what got passed down to me before I was even here? Oh, what got passed down to me chemically in the womb, right? What got passed to me that I didn't have a control over? And then what can I do? And now here's the cards I was dealt. So let me just first rename these are the cards I'm dealt. Now, how do I play these cards, right? Because ultimately, even though some of them I didn't get to choose, I still got to play them. I still got to navigate life with this deck that was handed to me in this city, in this state, in this body, in this, right? I got that. That if you gave me a choice, if you handed me a checklist in the womb and said, "Hey, how you want this life thing to look?" I would have picked many, many different options. You know what I mean? But there was no option. You just show up and you like, "Whoa, what's up with this?" And then you have to make the most of it. What I've learned is I have to make the most of it, and I've had to make the most of it. So, I guess one question I do have as we, wind this down, because I think we could talk for a lot longer, but I want, when you work with the young men you work with, because you're working the group I remember was a high school group, yeah?
Yeah, so I have one high school boys program, the Oberlin High School Men's Work Project here in Oberlin, Ohio. And then the other work that I do is predominantly with adult men, retreats. I lead a father-son retreat over Father's Day weekend, and I lead 16 and up men's retreats. Led 3 last year, and will likely lead 3 more this year. And then I have virtual weekly men's groups for adult men. But that is the one high school program that I do twice a month at my local high school that I graduated from in 2015.
Yeah. Okay. Even more. So, how do you, as an alumni from that school, get when you go back and see those young men? What are you hearing from them? What are you hearing from them? We have this thought process, this podcast coming up called "What's Up with Young Men." Like, what are you hearing from the young men in your community about what they feel like they are missing? Or maybe if they don't have the words to say what they feel like they're missing, what do they want? What do they want people to know about what it's like growing up as a young man today?
Well, I think that a lot of young men and boys today are experiencing a level of emotional disconnectedness and isolation that they don't even know how to properly articulate. And I think that it would be unfair of us to demand that they do express it in this eloquent way and name it, because it's something, as you said at the beginning of this episode, it's a system that has been designed for them to fail emotionally. And so expecting them to have an emotional vocabulary and be able to, speak to what's going on with accuracy is an unreasonable expectation, I believe, based on the current culture that we have. What I see with a lot of young men is good amount of body dysmorphia as bodybuilding culture and TikTok and Instagram and the proliferation of images of male bodies that are unreasonable and unrealistic. There's a lot of body dysmorphia and a lot of terms that are now floating around that have come from the incel community online and are now being more commonly used, such as the looks maxing and different terms about gym cell and things that denote needing to get in the gym or needing to get plastic surgery or needing to be taller or all of these things. So there's body dysmorphia and a very entrenched idea that a man looks a certain way, and they curate their lives around trying to pursue that. So a lot of them go to the gym very frequently, and I think there's a strong desire for companionship and to be seen and witnessed, but there isn't an opportunity or a space that makes it acceptable to do so outside of sports. And even then, there's this like filter. We've had some amazing conversations where boys have said, my coach is one of the people, my football coach is one of the people that's called me, the B word or the P word. And then it made me angry. And so then I called this boy because he missed his hit. So the next play I said, don't be a pussy, make your hit. And literally like in real time watching them say, if I don't have the capacity and the space to express how that made me feel, how a man or someone else speaking to me in that way made me feel, I'm going to pass it on to someone else as a way to motivate them. And another thing that I'll say is that young men are incredibly confused right now overall about what it means to be a man. So the words of influencers like Andrew Tate and Jordan Peterson, and again, bodybuilding social media content creators who have a very binary like alpha male versus beta male rhetoric, those messages are super appealing because it's a rubric, it's a blueprint, and there isn't an adequate blueprint or rubric from like progressive society at large. There aren't sufficient, here is how to be a good man. Here's how to demonstrate healthy masculinity. It's so much harder to do that and provide that guideline than it is just to say, well, don't be weak, don't be soft, don't cry. Like that's a pretty concrete list. Like at least it's the evil I know. So yeah, those are some of the things I hear from boys, and also that I see reflected in the adult men that I work with. There are adult men who, like a lot of us have never cried in front of our friends without the presence of alcohol. A lot of us have, don't habituate saying I love you on the phone or being expressive. And we've got a lot of unlearning to do because, as Bell Hooks famously said, the first act of violence that patriarchy demands of males is not violence against women, but it is psychic self-mutilation to numb ourselves. And if we are not successful at numbing ourselves emotionally, then we can rely on other patriarchal boys and men to enforce the rules of the patriarchy. So even for those boys that are on the cusp of sensitivity and expression, and maybe they don't have a certain home environment that's going to force them to be more numb, you can guarantee that there's going to be some form of patriarchal cultural influence that like hammers them into place. And that was certainly my experience as a young man. So walking back through the high school that I almost did not graduate from because of behavioral issues, because of performative masculinity, risky behaviors involving alcohol, and that almost got me expelled my senior year because I was trying to perform masculinity. I was trying to be popular, be well liked, and I did not have positive male role models in my life to attend to the wounds that I was experiencing. So it's honestly surreal to like go back into my high school and be administering the type of program that I would have benefited so much from. And I know you've said this as well in the about the work that you do, because it's like this would have been so great when I was a teenage boy.
Yeah. Oh man. But to be able to like now take that role, I'm so thankful. I'm so glad that you get to do this. And as you've now coming to I think you said over the last month, coming to a deeper understanding of your own childhood and youth, to like, oh, maybe I didn't know when I started it, what I was creating was what I needed. I created Ever Forward Club in 2004. I didn't go to my first men's team meeting to 2010. 6 years I'm doing this thing, like just something just makes sense about it. I don't even know what I'm doing. I just know that it feels like it needs to be done. I don't even know that it exists. I don't even know there's a place for men to do this work, but something tells me that it needs to happen. And then I go to my first men's meeting, 2010. I'm like, oh my goodness. Where has this been all my life? Where has this been all my life? Why hasn't anybody ever invited me to this? And I was like, well, my work gets to be from now on that the young men may not ever forward club, but they will never not hear about a space to go if they're ready. Because some of them are not ready.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah.
But some to know that they don't have to do it alone,
That was my experience as well. I mean, I coming out of a household where my father was a South African Special Forces veteran in the South African Border War, which was on behalf of the apartheid regime in South Africa. And he was part of a military unit that was notorious for, I think, over like 60% of the casualties of that part of the conflict, and had a nickname, the Murder Battalion. So my father was a killer. And I grew up in a household that was like rigidly patriarchal. Like from when I was really little, I would hear stories of violence, of death, and I internalized that as the way the real world is that I should expect violence. And my dad reinforced that in the ways that he tried to dominate my mom, my sister, and I, and also bully me into believing that these parts of my natural humanity that would, as a little boy that would never live up to this, the special forces unit in South Africa, that was inadequate and somehow less masculine. And so I grew up with this, this rigidly patriarchal environment, having to constantly numb myself and question what was wrong with me, not realizing that the standard I was being held to is not only an unrealistic standard in terms of patriarchy, but like an unrealistic standard in general. So I just grew up questioning and wildly insecure and feeling like there's something so wrong with me relative to other boys and other men. And I did have an adult man there with me for the first 17 years of my life telling me as much, that I couldn't hack it in a military environment. I shouldn't bother applying to college, and I also shouldn't bother enrolling in the U.S. Army because I wouldn't make it. And all of these different messages. So I learned to internalize them and believe that there was something wrong with me. And also, without ever being able to say, I am a survivor of domestic violence, there's physical and emotional abuse in my household. I never would have said that, but I gravitated in college towards an organization called Men Opposing Violence Everywhere, which facilitated conversations around sexual assault prevention for small groups on my campus at the University of Rochester. And that is where, in 2016, when I was 18 years old, we did a campus screening of The Mask You Live in April of 2016, and I was on the facilitation team. And so I started to talk to fraternities and sports teams and young men on my campus about toxic masculinity, which I don't use that phrase as much anymore, but also just cultural issues about like how does the way we conduct ourselves as men, as young men on this campus, contribute to rape culture, to violence. And again, never would have told a single soul about like, this is what's going on in my household, this is who my father is. End up getting an internship and gravitating towards like gender studies and wanting to really understand in international relations and economics, which I was studying. I was like, gender is not spoken about enough. And I don't even know what that means even. Like what, I need to learn more about this. And I got an internship at a domestic violence center when I was 21 years old. And that's how I rounded out my last year of college, is taking gender studies coursework in an academic setting and then also interning at the Willow Domestic Violence Center in Rochester, New York, in Monroe County. And it wasn't until my first day of training at this domestic violence center where we had to learn about what constitutes domestic violence and family violence. What is the power and control wheel? What are the actual mechanisms that abusers use on a day-to-day basis versus what we think of in popular culture? And it was the first day of that training I had what I can only describe as an epiphany, come to Jesus moment, where I had to excuse myself and go to the bathroom and have a bit of a breakdown, recognizing like so many different aspects of this power and control wheel, being like, yep. Like that's my life. That's my experience. And so it is very recent in the past, 26 now. So I would say it's the past like 4.5 years of my life that I have finally been able to work on and acknowledge that I did gravitate naturally towards work that I needed because of my lived experience and my identity. And that is what you have done as well. And I think it's sometimes I feel a lot of shame around that too, that it took me that long. It took me until I was 21 to cut my dad out of my life and to acknowledge everything that he had done. There were a lot of other external factors and situations and traumas that my family unit was experiencing that made it more confusing, that it didn't seem like he was the sole culprit. But I feel shame around not recognizing it earlier. But from then on, it was like that was my calling, was to help in any capacity with survivors of traumatic experiences, survivors of DV. But I then realized that I was one of the only men working in this shelter, working in the court system, and we were seeing women and children, but there were no men that were permitted to come to our shelter, and also there were no prevention or intervention or restoration programs. So I just had it on my radar. I was like, who is talking to men about some of the harm that we do, and also just about what's going on in our culture that causes us to harm ourselves and harm other people? And so then, I went down a worse mental health trajectory through the pandemic, graduating and recognizing this distinct lack of male support in my life. I became actually very skeptical and suspicious and resentful of male presence. I was like, that was the type of feminist I used to be, was that, the men ain't shit feminist, that there's something probably different about me because I'm enlightened, but most men were lost cause, trash, harmful. That was just my big father wound and my chip on my shoulder, not realizing what I needed was some deep love and support from men. I needed emotional sobriety, emotional reciprocity. I needed big hearts, and I needed hugs. I needed physical contact from men to learn that was safe and it was okay. And so I kind of was really exasperated at a very low point, didn't have any older mentors or any men over the age of maybe 30 that I spoke to regularly. And I realized if I wanted to connect a group of men, I would have to do it myself. That's what I thought at the time. My ambitious DIY, So I had an idea for my first men's retreat, and I invited a list of about 25 guys that I knew from my personal network, friends of mine from college, just telling people about it. And 9 of them agreed, sight unseen, didn't know each other. And they all met me where I was living at the time in northern Minnesota not in northern Minnesota, but we went to northern Minnesota for a men's retreat in 2022. And that was the start of Hey Brother Co. I had never formally been instructed how to facilitate men's groups or men's work. It was just something that came naturally to me to create space for men to express. And so, that was July 2022. And here I am, 4 or 5 retreats in now, and I could go on forever, but I'll pause.
Well, let's take a breath right there. That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Taking what perceivably was meant to hurt you and using it to propel you, taking it as the fuel, right? That's the fuel that I took to then take me to the next place. Yeah. Thank you. So, because I think that you and I this conversation could go even longer, but we're gonna end it in this episode, and then you and I are gonna find other ways that we can connect. And I know we're already connecting around some work that you're doing there in Ohio, and I'm grateful for you. I'm grateful for you for taking the time to be on the show with me, and for taking time out of your busy schedule to say, okay, I'm a little nervous, but I'm gonna go after it, and for being willing to just be present here with me in this time. Will you let folks know how they can get in touch with you, for men who may be interested in the work that you're doing, who may be in your area, or who are looking to support, right? Because, you're in this work. So tell them how they can find you or connect with you. What's the best ways? And we'll make sure we put this in the show notes as well, but I want to make sure you let folks know.
Absolutely. So you can find me on Instagram at Hey Brother Co, Hey Brother Co, and you can find me personally on Instagram at Hey Brother Johnny. My website is heybrotherco.com. That's heybrotherco.com, and that is where I post all of the retreats, signups for virtual men's groups, And you can subscribe to our newsletter. We curate blog posts, poetry. We have resources, books, and podcasts to start with, such as Taking Off the Mask. If you're interested in men's work and you don't know where to start, we have resources for parents who want to parent healthy boys or learn more about, again, books or films that would help them parent boys towards a healthier, authentic, activated version of masculinity. And I'm leading a father-son retreat. Despite everything that you just heard and not having a relationship with my own father, I think that one of the most paramount things that we can offer in our society and that we're losing is intergenerational men's work and intergenerational eldership and loving connection between fathers and sons, between mentors and mentees. And so I facilitate men's retreats for fathers and sons 16 and up. This will be Father's Day weekend in Cleveland, Ohio. So if you would like me to, please contact me and learn more directly. There are scholarships available, and I've already booked the place. So here in Cleveland.
Yeah. First of all, congratulations, and that sounds so powerful. And so, Johnny, thank you, brother.
Thank you, Ashanti. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I look forward to connecting with you further.
This is just the beginning. It's only the continuance of the beginning. Folks, Johnny and I, we shared our masks here publicly, but you don't have to share yours publicly. You can start by making a mask anonymously at millionmask.org. And maybe when you start doing that process, it will inspire you to find somebody in your life who you would share it with. Thank you again, Brother Johnny, for being on the show. And we are looking forward to you being a part of this journey with us as we approach 20 years in May. Stay tuned for all the exciting mask work we get to do. And we will see you next time on Taking Off the Mask podcast. Be well, everybody. Bye, Johnny. The Taking Off the Mask podcast is produced by Ryan Louie and graphics by Kelly Wong. Guests are managed by Dan Paloma, and the podcast is edited by Samuel Matingo. We'd like to thank everyone who's been a part of the creation of this podcast, and for every guest that has been a part of the show, you are now a part of the Taking Off the Mask family. The Taking Off the Mask podcast is brought to you by the Ever Forward Club. And if you like what you've heard today, please subscribe, write a 5-star review, and share this with someone. We look forward to having more conversations that matter. And please remember, there's more to you than anybody can see by just looking at you.